The forest held its breath as we played our games, our laughter echoing through the trees like a challenge to the silence. We were 10, invincible in our own minds, building forts and dreaming of battles. But that day, Gordon brought something into our world, something cold, heavy, and stained with the ghosts of a war we couldn't understand. And it changed us forever. It was the summer of 1985, and the Kentish countryside was our kingdom. I was 10, a scrawny kid with a mop of brown hair and a knack for getting into trouble. My best mate was Gordon, a wiry boy with a fire in his eyes and an obsession that defined him, the army. He lived for war stories, his bedroom a shrine of plastic soldiers, air-fix tanks, and dog-eared books about battles long past. He'd spend hours painting tiny planes, his fingers stained with enamel, dreaming of the day he'd wear a real uniform. I didn't share his passion, but I loved his energy, the way he made every adventure feel epic. Our third friend, Eugene, was a reluctant tag-along, always whining about bugs or thorns, but he stuck with us because we were all he had. We spent that summer in the woods behind our village, a tangle of oaks and brambles, where we'd built a tree fort, a rickety platform nailed to a sturdy trunk, our secret base. It was our battlefield, our castle where we played soldiers wielding stick rifles and shouting orders. Gordon was always the general, his commands sharp and serious, while Eugene and I followed, half laughing, half awed by his intensity. Those days were golden, filled with the smell of earth and the thrill of freedom. But looking back, I see the cracks, Gordon's fervor, his need to control the way his games edged closer to something darker. That Saturday started like any other. We met at Gordon's house, a squat cottage with a garden full of roses his mum tended religiously. Gordon was in a mood. His eyes narrowed because I'd let Eugene join us. "He's a whiner," Gordon muttered, but I shrugged it off. We had a mission visit, Grandpa Derek Gordon's grandfather, before heading to the fort. Derek was a World War II veteran, a quiet man with kind eyes and hands that trembled when he poured tea. His flat was a time capsule, its shelves lined with faded photos and medals he never talked about. Gordon worshipped him not for the man he was, but for the soldier he'd been. I saw the way Derek's smile faltered when Gordon asked about the war, but I didn't understand it then. We sat in Derek's living room, the air thick with the scent of pipe tobacco and old books. Eugene fidgeted bored, while Gordon peppered Derek with questions about battles, his voice eager, almost hungry. Derek answered softly, his stories vague, his eyes distant. I felt uneasy, sensing a weight in his words, a pain Gordon couldn't see. At one point, Gordon slipped away to the storage room, a cluttered space where Derek kept tools and boxes. I thought he was grabbing a snack, but when he returned, his grin was too wide, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Something was wrong, but I didn't know what. We left Derek's, promising to be home by supper, and trekked to the forest. The sun was high, filtering through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the path. Eugene complained about nettles, his voice a constant drone. But Gordon was alive, his steps quick, his mood lifted. I wondered what had changed, what secret he was holding. Our fort loomed ahead, its planks weathered but sturdy, a testament to our summer's work. We climbed up the wood, warm under our hands, and settled in, ready to play. Gordon declared a new game, a real battle, not just sticks and shouts, but something authentic. His eyes gleamed, and I felt a prickle of unease, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Then he showed us what he'd taken, and the world shifted. Gordon reached into his backpack, his movements slow, deliberate, and pulled out two objects that froze my blood. The first was a pistol, its metal dull, but menacing, the weight of it real in his hand. The second was a grenade, its shape unmistakable from Gordon's war books, a green orb with a lever and a missing pin. My heart lurched, my mind screaming that these weren't toys. Eugene's face went pale, his eyes wide with terror. "Gordon, what the hell?" I said, my voice cracking. He grinned a smile that didn't reach his eyes and held the grenade higher. "It's real," he said, his tone calm, almost reverent. "From Grandpa Derek's war." I knew about the stories, kids finding old munitions in fields, warnings at school about live grenades. But this was different. Gordon's obsession had brought us here to a moment where play could turn deadly. Eugene stammered, his voice high. "That's gonna blow us up, you idiot." Gordon's smile widened, and he stepped closer, the grenade glinting in the sunlight. "If I let go of this lever," he said, "we're all gone. Heroes like in the war." My stomach churned his words, a twisted echo of the stories he loved. He's not joking. I thought, my hands trembling. He's lost in his own game. I tried to reason with him, my voice steady, despite the panic clawing at me. Gordon put it down. "This isn't a battle. There's no enemy." Eugene was frantic, his eyes darting to the trees, ready to bolt. I saw the fear in him, the same fear I felt, and knew we were balanced on a knife's edge. Gordon's face hardened, his grip on the grenade tightening. "You don't get it," he said, his voice low. "This is what Grandpa Derek did. This is real. He stepped toward me, the pistol still in his pocket, and I felt trapped, the fort's walls closing in. Something snapped inside me. A surge of instinct. I lunged my hand, closing around the grenade, wrenching it from his grasp. I hurled it into the trees, my heart pounding, expecting an explosion. Nothing happened. Silence stretched the forest, holding its breath. And then Gordon laughed a wild, manic sound that chilled me. "It's fake," he said, doubling over, his laughter echoing. "A model. You should see your faces." Eugene was shaking, his fists clenched, but I just stared, my relief warring with anger. He'd planned this, wanted us to feel that fear. I shoved him hard, my frustration boiling over. "You're crazy," I shouted, and he stumbled, still laughing. But as he caught himself, something fell from his pocket, the pistol heavy and real, hitting a rock with a dull thud. Time slowed, the world narrowing to that moment. The gun discharged a flash of light and a sound that deafened me, ringing in my ears. Eugene crumpled, a red streak blooming on his forehead, and I screamed, my voice lost in the chaos. Gordon's laughter stopped, his face ashen, his eyes wide with shock. I dropped to my knees beside Eugene, my hands hovering over him, afraid to touch. Blood trickled down his face, but his eyes fluttered open, confused but alive. "I'm okay," he croaked, his voice weak. The bullet had grazed his skull, a shallow wound that looked worse than it was. I tore off my shirt, pressing it to his head, my hands shaking. Gordon stood frozen, the grenade forgotten, the pistol lying in the dirt. What have we done? I thought, my mind reeling. What has he done? We stumbled back to the village, Eugene leaning on me, Gordon trailing behind. Silent now. We reached Derek's flat, his face crumpling as he saw us. He called for help, his hands steady, despite the tremor in his voice. The paramedics came, their lights flashing through the dusk, and Eugene was whisked away, his wound cleaned and bandaged. The police questioned us, their voices stern but kind, piecing together the story. Derek admitted the pistol was his, a relic he'd thought was unloaded, kept for memory, not use. The grenade, as Gordon said, was a model, harmless but terrifying in his hands. The aftermath was a blur. Eugene recovered the graze, leaving a scar he'd later flaunt as a badge of coolness. Derek faced no charges. The laws laxer then, but Gordon's world collapsed. His parents stripped his room of military toys, banned us from Derek's without supervision, and grounded him for months. He never spoke of the army again. His fire extinguished. And when I saw him, years later, managing a supermarket, he was a stranger, quiet, ordinary, the boy who dreamed of war, gone forever, that day haunts me a shadow I can't outrun. I see the pistols. Flash, hear Eugene's gasp, feel the weight of the grenade in my hand. I wonder what drove Gordon to that edge. What part of him craved that power? Derek's stories, his silent pain, were a warning we didn't heed. War isn't a game, not even for kids. I still visit those woods, but the fort is gone, rotted away, like our innocence. Some games leave scars, and ours marked us all, Eugene with his wound, Gordon with his shame, and me with a fear that lingers a whisper of what could have been. The forest was alive with secrets, its shadows weaving through the gnarled branches like whispered warnings. I stood in our makeshift tree fort, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, my heart pounding as Gordon's eyes gleamed with a manic intensity. He held something in his hand, something that didn't belong in the hands of a 10-year-old, a dull metallic object that caught the fading sunlight. "Want to see something cool?" he asked, his voice low, almost daring me to look away. In that moment, I felt it a chill that wasn't from the wind, a certainty that whatever he was about to show me would change everything. My name is redacted, and back in the summer of 1985, I was just a kid growing up in the Kentish countryside, where days were spent running through fields and building forts with my friends. Gordon was my closest mate, a wiry boy with an obsession for all things military. His room was a shrine to war plastic soldiers lined up on shelves, Airfix model tanks meticulously painted and dog-eared, books about World War II stacked in every corner. He'd spend hours recounting battles, his voice feverish, as if he'd lived them himself. I didn't share his passion, but I went along with it, mostly because Gordon was magnetic in his own way, charismatic, intense, and impossible to say no to. We spent most weekends at his grandpa Derek's flat, a cramped ground floor space filled with the smell of old tobacco and polished wood. Derek was a World War II veteran, a gentle man with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. He'd tell us stories, but never about the war, not unless Gordon pushed him, which he always did. "Did you ever kill anyone?" Grandpa Gordon would ask, his voice sharp with excitement. Derek's smile would falter, his hands fidgeting, but he'd deflect with a tale about army rations or muddy trenches. I could see it pained him, but Gordon never noticed, too caught up in his own fantasies of heroism. That Saturday, we'd gone to Derek's with our friend Eugene, a whiny kid Gordon barely tolerated. Eugene wasn't like us. He complained about everything, from the brambles scratching his legs to the midges buzzing around our heads. Gordon was in a foul mood, annoyed that I'd let Eugene tag along. But something shifted when we were at Derek's. While Eugene and I played cards, Gordon slipped into the storage room, emerging with a secretive grin. "Let's go to the fort," he said. His tone clipped, and I knew better than to argue. Eugene trailed behind, muttering about thorns as we trekked through the woods to our hideout, a rickety platform of plywood and branches nestled in a clearing. The fort was our sanctuary, a place where we could be soldiers, explorers, or whatever Gordon decided. That day, he wanted to play war as always. We ran through the trees, wielding stick guns, shouting orders, and dodging imaginary bullets. Eugene whined about the mud, but even he got caught up in the game, his complaints fading as Gordon took charge. The sun was dipping low, painting the forest in hues of gold and shadow, when Gordon called us over. "You guys ready for something real?" His voice had an edge, a thrill that made my stomach twist. He reached into his backpack, and my breath caught as he pulled out two objects, a handgun, its metal glinting dully, and a grenade, its pin missing. My heart stopped. I knew what they were, not from experience, but from Gordon's endless lectures about weapons. The gun was a Luger Piso, a relic from the war, and the grenade looked real, its surface pitted and heavy in his hand. "Is that Liv?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eugene's eyes widened, his face paling. Gordon's smile grew sharp and unsettling. Maybe he said, twirling the grenade between his fingers, "If I let go of this lever, we're all done." Eugene shrieked, his voice piercing the quiet forest. "It's gonna explode. You're gonna kill us." I tried to stay calm, my mind racing. "Don't panic," I told myself, but my hands were shaking. Gordon's eyes locked on mine, his expression unreadable. "It's a test," he said, "to see if you're brave enough." He stepped closer, the grenade still in his hand, the Luger tucked into his jacket pocket. I could smell the sweat on him, the dirt smeared on his cheeks, the faint metallic tang of the objects he held. The forest seemed to close in the trees, looming like silent witnesses. Eugene was trembling, glancing at the path behind us, ready to bolt. "Don't run," I said, my voice steady, despite the fear clawing at my chest. Gordon put it down. He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the clearing. "You don't get it. This is what heroes do. They face danger." He raised the grenade, his thumb brushing the lever, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. "If we die, we'll be legends," he said, his voice dreamy, almost trance-like. I stepped forward, my fear giving way to anger. This isn't a game, Gordon. You're not a soldier. His face darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might actually do it. Let go, end us all in a stupid, reckless moment. Then Eugene lunged his panic, overriding sense, and tried to grab the grenade. I moved faster, snatching it from Gordon's hand and hurling it into the trees. We froze, waiting for an explosion that never came. Gordon's laughter broke the silence, sharp and manic. "It's fake, you idiots," he said, doubling over. "Just a model." Relief flooded me, my knees weak, but Eugene was still shaking his face, a mix of terror and rage. I shoved Gordon hard, my frustration boiling over. "That wasn't funny," I said, my voice trembling. As I pushed him, something fell from his jacket, a heavy thud against the ground. The Luger. It hit a rock, and before I could react, a deafening crack split the air. My ears rang the world tilting. Eugene crumpled, a red stain blooming on his forehead. I screamed, my voice lost in the ringing, and dropped to my knees beside him. Gordon's face was white, his eyes wide with shock. "I didn't mean," he stammered, but I barely heard him. Blood trickled down Eugene's face, his eyes fluttering. "He's dead." I thought my mind spiraling, but then he groaned, his hand twitching. The next moments were chaos. I shouted for help, my voice raw, while Gordon stood frozen, the Luger at his feet. We later learned it was Grandpa Derek's, kept from the war, thought to be unloaded and broken. The fall had dislodged a jam, firing a single bullet that grazed Eugene's forehead. A miracle it wasn't worse. Paramedics arrived, their lights flashing through the trees, and Eugene was rushed to the hospital. He survived the wound shallow, turning him into a school legend overnight. Gordon faced consequences. His parents stripped his room of military toys, banned us from Derek's without supervision, and grounded him for months. Derek escaped serious trouble. The gun laws looser back then, but he was shaken, guilt-ridden. Eugene shockingly thrived on the attention, joking years later that getting shot was the best thing that ever happened to him. Gordon grew up, became a supermarket manager, his military dreams abandoned. We still talk, but the forest, the fort, the gun, they're ghosts we don't mention. What if the grenade had been real? The thought lingers, a shadow in every quiet moment, a reminder of how close we came to losing everything. William's eyes gleamed in the kindergarten light, a predator's stare hidden behind a child's smile. And even at 5, I knew he owned me. He wasn't my friend. He was my keeper, a shadow who turned my laughter into tears, my days into a maze of fear. Our mothers were close, their friendship chaining me to him, and William decided I was his toy, a living doll to break and remake at his whim. His favorite game was simple: make me cry. And as I sit here now, decades later, the scars he left on my skin, my soul still ache, a reminder of the night he almost ended me. We met in a classroom filled with crayons and laughter, but for me, it was a battlefield. William was cunning his cruelty, invisible to adults. He'd pinch the soft flesh of my thigh under the table, his fingers sharp as claws, leaving bruises I hid under my jeans. He'd flick my ear with a rubber band, the sting a secret I carried in silence. I became the crybaby, the clumsy kid who tripped and wept, my pain dismissed as weakness. But it was always William, his hands, his malice, his control. I was too scared to tell his threats, a noose around my heart. He'd whisper them during recess, his voice low, promising worse if I spoke. And I believed him. His torment grew with us, a weed choking my childhood. At recess, he'd drag me behind the school, away from teachers' eyes, and tighten my t-shirt collar around my neck until my vision blurred my stomach heaving. He'd press a pin into my arm, the metal biting the pain of fire under my skin. My toys broke, my clothes tore, and I took the blame, my parents' sighs, a weight I carried. William made sure I had no other friends, his presence a wall between me and the world. Yet in my young mind, I thought this was friendship. I invited him over, hoping to please him. But my toys paid the price, my parents' patience fraying, when he left chaos behind. His house was different, richer, colder. He had a dog, a Nintendo, an older sister who ignored us. The Nintendo was his prize, a glowing screen I was never allowed to touch. He'd let me watch, promising a turn that never came. His smirk, a silent taunt. His bunk beds were a novelty, a thrill for a kid like me who slept on a single mattress. Sleepovers were rare. My fear of him sharper at night. But sometimes I had no choice. Our mom's friendship made his house the default when my parents were away. I'd lie awake, listening to his breathing, praying for morning. We were 8 and 9 when it happened, me the older by a few months. It was a warm May night, the air thick with the scent of blooming flowers. I'd taken the top bunk, excited by its height. Unaware, William chose the bottom because he feared falling. I fell asleep to the hum of his dog's snores, the world soft and safe for a moment. But then a hand gripped my arm, yanking me awake. William's face loomed, his eyes glinting in the moonlight. He splashed water in my face, the cold a shock that stole my breath. "We're going to the park," he said, his voice flat, final. I protested, my voice small, but his fingers twitched toward my arm, a warning I knew too well. I followed my pajamas, thin against the night. My shoes, a small mercy he allowed. The park near his house was a shadow of its daytime self, the jungle gym, a skeletal giant under a single dim street lamp. William had always avoided it, calling it childish, but tonight it was his stage. "Climb to the top," he commanded, his voice cutting through the quiet. I hesitated, the darkness swallowing the bars, but his stare pushed me forward. I was agile, my body light, and climbing was easier than facing his anger. I scaled the netting, my hands gripping cold metal, and reached the top, my breath steady despite the height. I felt a flicker of pride, a rare moment of strength. Then his voice came again, sharp and mocking. "Do a handstand." My heart sank. I was no acrobat, and he knew it. I shook my head, my voice trembling. "I can't." His shrug was casual, almost bored, and he turned away, melting into the shadows. Relief washed over me, fleeting and foolish. Then pain exploded in my skull, a blinding flash of light and heat. I stumbled, my balance gone, and fell 12 feet to the ground. My body hit with a sickening crunch, a symphony of breaking bones. I tasted copper, felt warmth on my cheek, blood, not tears. My arm twisted unnaturally, my legs useless, a white-hot agony coursing through me. I lay there, unable to move my vision, swimming. William's footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. He sat beside me, his face calm, almost serene. "See, this is what happens when you don't obey," he said, his voice a lecture, not a plea. He spoke of safety, of rules, as if my shattered body was my fault. His words blurred his excitement, a sick undercurrent that chilled me more than the pain. I faded in and out, the world a haze of agony and fear. He sat there, rocking slightly, for nearly an hour, watching me bleed my life slipping away. I thought he'd let me die, a sacrifice to his control. Finally, he left, his steps fading. Paramedics came, their voices distant, their hands pulling me from the brink. I woke in a hospital, my body a map of fractures, arm, legs, ribs, vertebrae, a skull cracked like porcelain. Surgeries followed my recovery, a blur of pain and pills. But the real relief came when I told the truth, the years of torment spilling out. The doctors had suspected the rock's mark on my temple too precise for an accident. My parents believed me their anger a shield I'd never felt before. William's family paid the bills, a hollow gesture. He was sent to a behavioral camp, the youngest ever, his mother's tears meaning nothing to me. Years later, he sent an apology letter. I didn't read it. My parents let me burn it, the flames a cleansing I needed. Refusing his words was my victory, a reclaiming of my voice. I walk with a limp, now a reminder of that night, but the deeper scars are in my mind. William's eyes, his voice, his calm as I bled. I don't know where he is, and I don't care. He's a footnote, a ghost I've outlived. But if he's out there hearing this, I want him to know you almost killed me. But I'm still here. My grandfather once told me about a boy in his village, a child who hurt animals for fun. The village shunned him, and he vanished, but his shadow lingered in their stories. William was that boy, his cruelty, a poison that seeped into my childhood. I survived him, but some nights I still feel his eyes watching from the dark. The night was too still, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin, warning you to stay alert. I pulled into my driveway, the familiar glow of our suburban streetlights, a false promise of safety. But across the road, idling like a predator in wait, was a rusted pickup truck, its engine growling low, its presence a stain on the night. Someone was watching me, and I didn't know why. It was the summer of 2015, and I was a 20-something grad student juggling classes and a part-time job at a university in a small southern town. Our house, a modest 2-bedroom rental a few miles from campus, was my haven after long days. I shared it with my roommate, a laid-back guy who worked odd hours, and our dog, a mutt, who loved people a little too much. My routine was predictable. Morning lectures, afternoon shifts home by 9:00 p.m. to collapse on the couch. That night, I was bone-tired, my eyes heavy as I drove through our neighborhood, its tidy lawns and modern cars, a picture of suburban calm. But as I turned onto our street, that calm shattered. The truck was wrong out of place, like a scar on a perfect canvas. It sat across from my house, parked at the yield sign, its engine idling with a low, guttural hum. It was old, its paint peeling dents, marring its frame, nothing like the sleek SUVs and sedans of our neighbors. The windows were tinted, the driver invisible, but I felt their gaze a weight that pinned me in my seat. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and stared, willing the truck to move. It didn't. The street was empty, no cars or pedestrians to justify its lingering. Was he texting, lost, or waiting for me. I'm a petite woman, cautious by nature, and I'd stopped carrying pepper spray after a year of feeling safe here. But that truck stirred something primal, a warning in my gut. I stayed in my car, the engine still running, my phone clutched in my lap. Minutes dragged, each one heavier than the last, until finally the truck's headlights flickered and it pulled away slow and deliberate, disappearing toward the main road. I exhaled, my shoulders sagging, but the unease lingered, a splinter under my skin. "You're overreacting," I told myself, grabbing my bag and heading inside, locking the door behind me. The house was quiet. My roommate still at work. Our dog curled up in his bed, oblivious. I flicked on the kitchen light, the familiar hum of the fridge grounding me as I started dinner. But my eyes kept drifting to the front door, its diamond-shaped window, a vulnerability I'd always hated. What if he comes back? I pushed the thought away, focusing on chopping vegetables, the knife's rhythm a distraction. A memory surfaced, a story my coworker told during a break about a neighbor who'd seen a strange car circling their block for weeks, always at night, never stopping. Probably just a creep, she'd said, but her voice had trembled. I shook my head, telling myself our town was safe, our street too ordinary for trouble. By 11 p.m., I was in my room folding laundry, a podcast droning through my earbuds. My roommate was due home soon, his late shifts a regular inconvenience. I was halfway through a stack of shirts when the world went dark. Every light in the house snuffed out, plunging me into blackness. My heart lurched, my earbuds falling silent as the power died. I froze the laundry, slipping from my hands, the silence deafening. Outside, the street light still glowed, its yellow light spilling through my window, mocking the darkness inside. No storm, no flickering, just sudden, unnatural dark. I grabbed my phone, its screen a weak beacon, and called my roommate. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice tight. "On my way." 5 minutes, he said, his tone casual. "Hurry," I urged, hanging up. I told myself it was a blown fuse, a glitch, but the timing felt wrong, too perfect. I crept to the living room, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, and peered through the diamond window. The neighbors' houses were lit, their windows warm with life. Just us then. My stomach twisted, the truck's image flashing in my mind. Had he done this? Was he out there waiting? I stood on tiptoe, scanning the street, my breath fogging the glass. The street light cast a sickly glow, illuminating the empty road, or so I thought. Then I saw him, and my blood turned to ice. A man stood under the light, maybe 6 feet tall, his frame heavy, his clothes grimy, jeans streaked with dirt. a white t-shirt stained with grease. His hair was unkempt, his round glasses glinting, and his face held a smug, knowing smile, like he'd caught me in a game I didn't know I was playing. He wasn't there a moment ago, hadn't walked into view. He'd just appeared as if the night had conjured him. My legs trembled. But I didn't move the darkness inside, hiding me from his gaze. He took a step toward the house, then another. His movements casual, almost leisurely, but his eyes never left the door. He's coming for me. The thought was a scream in my mind, my body frozen as he crossed the lawn, each step deliberate, his shadow stretching long and warped. He glanced around, checking for witnesses, but the street was deserted, the neighbors oblivious. My dog, usually a whirlwind of excitement at any sound, lay silent in his bed, unaware, leaving me alone with this stranger's intent. I fumbled with my phone, my fingers clumsy, ready to dial 911 when headlights swept across the yard. My roommate's car roared around the corner, its beams catching the man mid-step. His head snapped toward the light, his smug smile vanishing, replaced by something raw, recognition, maybe, or fear. He knew that car. He stumbled, nearly stepping into the street, and my roommate swerved, tires screeching, pulling into the driveway. The man bolted, his figure swallowed by the shadows beyond the street light, gone as quickly as he'd appeared. My roommate burst through the door, his face, pale eyes, wild. "Did you see him?" he demanded, not waiting for an answer. He grabbed an axe from the utility closet, a relic from our camping trips, and stormed outside, shouting into the night. I followed my voice, shaking, as I explained the truck. The blackout, the man. He checked the yard, the alley, but found nothing. The darkness empty. We called the police and the power company, our voices overlapping in panic. The repairman arrived first, resetting a switch on the pole outside. "It flipped," he said, his tone vague, avoiding my question about sabotage. The police found no trace of the man, no tire tracks, no clues. We left for a camping trip that weekend, escaping the house that no longer felt safe. When we returned, everything was normal lights, on locks secure, but the fear lingered. How long had he been watching us? I wondered, my mind replaying his smile, his deliberate steps. My roommate and I moved soon after, unable to shake the sense of violation. I never saw the truck again, but I feel it sometimes in the quiet of new places, a shadow waiting just beyond the light. He's still out there, and I'll never know what he wanted or what would have happened if I'd been alone. The street was empty, bathed in the sodium glow of a single street lamp, but the rumble of an engine cut through the silence like a warning. Across from my house, an old pickup truck idled at the yield sign, its rusted body a hulking shadow against the night. I sat in my car, keys dangling in my hand, my breath shallow as I watched it. No one else was out here. No neighbors, no passing cars, just me and that truck. Its headlights, dim, unmoving. Something about it felt wrong, like it wasn't just waiting for a turn. It was waiting for me. My name is Emily, and I was a 22-year-old student at a small university in a sleepy southern town. My life was predictable. Morning classes, afternoon shifts at the campus library, and evenings at home in a modest 2-bedroom house I shared with my roommate Ben. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with neat lawns and modern cars, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. But that Thursday night, in the summer of 2015, as I pulled into my driveway at 9:00 p.m., the air felt heavier, charged with a tension I couldn't explain. I'd just finished a long shift, my shoulders aching from shelving books, my eyes gritty from staring at computer screens. All I wanted was a hot meal and my bed. But as I parked, my gaze caught on that truck, beat-up paint peeling dents, marring its sides. It didn't belong here. Our neighbors drove sleek SUVs or polished sedans, not relics like this. I stayed in my car, my hand on the door handle, watching. Maybe they were lost, I thought. But the truck didn't move its engine, growling low, like a predator biding its time. My heart beat faster, a primal instinct stirring. "Don't get out yet," it whispered. I'm a petite woman, barely 5 feet tall, and I'd stopped carrying pepper spray after a year of feeling safe in this town. Now I regretted it. The street was deserted, the windows of nearby houses dark. Ben wasn't home. He'd texted earlier about grabbing drinks with friends. I was alone, and the truck's presence felt like a violation, an intrusion into my routine. I gripped my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but hesitated. What would I say? There's a truck parked across the street. It sounded ridiculous, even to me. Still, I waited. My eyes locked on the vehicle, willing it to leave. Minutes dragged by 5, maybe 10, before the truck finally moved. Its tires crunched on the asphalt, slow and deliberate, as it rolled out of the neighborhood toward the main road. I exhaled, my shoulders sagging, but the unease lingered, a cold weight in my chest. "You're being paranoid," I told myself, stepping out of my car. The night air was warm, thick with the scent of cut grass and distant rain. I hurried to the front door, my keys jingling, and locked it behind me. The sound of the bolt sliding into place, oddly comforting. Inside the house was quiet. The living room, lit by a single lamp I'd left on. I kicked off my shoes, my mind still on the truck, and headed to the kitchen to make dinner. The hum of the microwave and the clink of dishes grounded me, pushing the incident to the back of my mind. By 11:00 p.m., I was in my room folding laundry and listening to a podcast through my earbuds. Ben still wasn't home, but I wasn't worried. He often stayed out late. I was halfway through a stack of shirts when the lights went out. The darkness was instant, absolute, swallowing the room. My podcast cut off, leaving only the faint buzz of static in my ears. I yanked out my earbuds, my heart lurching. A power outage. I stood, my hands outstretched, feeling my way to the window. The street lamp outside still glowed, and the neighbors' porch lights were on, steady and bright. Just our house, I realized, my stomach twisting. The power didn't go out here, not without a storm, and the sky was clear. Stars piercing the black. I grabbed my phone, its screen casting a pale glow, and called Ben. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice tight. He was cheerful, slightly drunk, and said he'd be home in 5 minutes. "Hurry," I said, hanging up. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it was a blown fuse, something simple. I moved to the living room, my phone's flashlight guiding me, and paused at the front door. It had a small diamond-shaped window, one I'd always hated for how exposed it made me feel. I stood on tiptoe, peering out, checking the neighbors' lights again. Still on. Something's wrong. As I stepped back, my phone buzzed a text from my mom. Something mundane about a family dinner. I replied quickly, my thumbs fumbling, and glanced out the window again. My breath stopped. Under the street lamp, not 20 feet from my porch, stood a man. He hadn't been there moments ago. Middle-aged, tall, with a pot belly, straining against a filthy white t-shirt, his jeans streaked with grease. His round glasses glinted under the light, his unkempt hair falling over a face that wore a smug, knowing smile. I'd never seen him before, but that smile sent a shiver down my spine, like he knew something I didn't. I froze my body, pressed against the door, grateful for the darkness inside, hiding me. He started moving not fast, but with a casual shuffle, straight toward my house. My heart pounded, my mind racing. He's coming for me. His steps were deliberate, his head tilting as he scanned the yard like he was checking for witnesses. My dog Max usually barked at strangers, but he was silent, curled up in his bed, oblivious. The man was halfway across the lawn, when headlights swept the street. Ben's car rounding the corner, the man turned his face, caught in the glare, and I saw it clearly. A flicker of recognition, then panic. He stumbled, nearly stepping into the road, as Ben swerved into the driveway. Ben burst out, his face flushed, and charged into the house, not even glancing at me. "Where's the axe?" he demanded, heading for the utility closet. I pointed my voice, stuck, as he grabbed it and ran back outside. But the man was gone, vanished into the night, like a shadow. We called the police and the power company. The officers arrived first, their flashlights sweeping the yard, but found no trace of the man, no footprints, no tire marks. The repairman came next, climbing the pole outside our house. Switch was flipped. He said, his tone neutral, but he wouldn't meet my eyes when I asked if someone could have done it. Someone turned off our power. The thought sank into me hollow and heavy as I stood in the driveway clutching my phone. The next day, Ben and I left for a weekend camping trip, a plan we'd made weeks ago. If the man came back, we didn't know. After that night, I refused to be home alone. If Ben wasn't around, I'd linger at a local bar, nursing a soda, until he texted me. We moved away a few months later. The lease up the house, a memory I wanted to forget. I never saw the truck or the man again, but I can't shake the feeling he'd been watching us for days, maybe weeks, waiting for the right moment. What if Ben hadn't come home? The question haunts me, a shadow that lingers in every quiet night, a reminder that safety is fragile, easily shattered by a stranger's gaze. The hallway stretched before me, a tunnel of shadows leading to Jacob's door, where a stench like rotting socks seeped through the cracks, whispering that something was terribly wrong. My brother hadn't left his room in 3 days, not since we brought him home from the hospital. His face pale as ash, his eyes rolling back in his skull. I stood frozen, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. The New York Yankees poster on his door, the only sign of life in a house that felt like a tomb. Mom was in the kitchen, her 6th casserole of the week, baking the smell of butter and cheese, a mask for the truth none of us dared to face. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. Jacob wasn't just resting. He was gone, and we were all pretending he wasn't. Our house had always been loud, filled with Jacob's laughter, his pranks, the way he'd flick my ear and run, daring me to chase him. We'd play that game for hours, sneaking through the halls, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But the cancer changed everything. It crept into him last year, stealing his strength, his color, his voice. The treatments left him hollow, a ghost of the brother. I knew his hair falling out in clumps, his coughs wet with pink spit. The drive home from his last hospital stay was a nightmare, his head lolling against the car window, his eyes unfocused. My stories about school pranks falling flat. I talked to keep him awake as Mom insisted, but he didn't respond, just stared at nothing. A stranger in my brother's skin. Now, 3 days later, he was locked in his room, and my parents acted like it was normal. Mom cooked endlessly, her hands trembling as she slathered butter on casserole crusts, her hair graying overnight, hanging limp over the food. Dad came and went, his eyes red and swollen, but his smile forced, clutching cans of Coke like they'd anchor him to reality. They wouldn't let me near Jacob's door, their voices sharp when I asked. "He needs his strength," Mom said, her eyes avoiding mine. "He'll eat when he's ready." But the fridge was overflowing with uneaten casseroles, their foil lids glinting like accusations. I stood in the kitchen, watching Mom's curved back, tugging her sleeve, but she didn't turn. "Mom, people don't sleep this long," I said, my voice small. She didn't answer, just kept spreading butter. Her silence a wall. Dad walked in his face, a mask of false cheer. "I'm starving," he said, setting the Cokes down. Still got that hospital cafeteria taste in my mouth. Mom nodded, her voice flat. "You'd think they'd have better food for all that money." They talked about fast food chains, contracts, anything but Jacob. Their words, a desperate dance around the truth. I slipped away, my eyes drawn to the hallway. Jacob's door loomed at the end, a lighthouse abandoned in a storm. I checked the sliver of space beneath it. No light, just darkness as it had been for days. The smell hit me then, sharp and sour, cutting through Mom's candles and incense. It wasn't just socks. It was decay, a truth my nose knew before my mind could accept. I turned back, my voice louder. "Shouldn't we check on him?" Dad ignored me, his face inches from the casserole, inhaling deeply. "Smells great," he said, and Mom offered leftovers, their voices overlapping in a rehearsed rhythm. The spinach and ricotta was so good, Dad said, his grin too wide. "Jacob's gonna love these when he's hungry." Mom added her words hollow. I took a step toward the hallway, the distance to Jacob's door, feeling like a tightrope over an abyss. The casserole smell faded, replaced by that stench, heavy and inescapable. My heart pounded each beat. A question. What's in that room? Memories of Jacob flooded me. His ear-flicking game, his comic books, the way he'd tease me about my math homework. But the last time I saw him in the car, He wasn't Jacob anymore. His face was green, his lips cracked pink, drool staining his shirt. I'd lied about school pranks, desperate to fill the silence. But he didn't even blink. Now standing in the hallway, I dreamed of him running and flicking my ear, laughing. But in my dreams, I didn't move, and he flicked harder until my ear tore away a grotesque echo of his illness. I shook my head, pushing the image away, but the smell pulled me back, a siren's call to the truth. Danny Mom said, her voice sharp heat up some leftovers. We're craving that spinach and ricotta. Dad nodded, his eyes glassy. Dreamed about it last night. I ignored them, my feet carrying me closer to Jacob's door. Dad stepped in front of me, his fingers snapping in my face, blocking my view. Heat up 4 portions, he said, his voice heavy. We want Jacob to try it. It's one of Mom's best. I stared into his eyes, searching for answers, but saw only a void, a well so deep it swallowed light. He turned me around, his hands firm, lecturing about warming each piece separately, his words a distraction. I nodded, but my mind was on that door, the smell, the silence. I lingered in the hallway, my back to the kitchen, Jacob's door, pulling me like a magnet. I imagined opening it, finding him reading comics, planning his next prank. But fear stopped me. Fear of Mom's anger, fear of what I'd see. I'd been in his room before, forced to talk during his treatments. His puke bucket, splattered pink, sat by the bed, his pillows littered with hair. I'd make excuses, a cold homework, anything, to escape his labored breathing, his hollow eyes. Now, I couldn't avoid it. My feet moved unbidden, like a puppet on strings. My hand found the doorknob, cold and slick, and I turned it. The smell hit first, a wave of rot that filled my lungs, my head spinning. Darkness cloaked the room, but evening light slipped through the blinds, illuminating a sliver of Jacob's face. His eyes were open wide and unblinking, staring at the ceiling. His arms lay rigid, fingers curled like petals, his lips parted, red spit trailing down his chin. He looked like a clown, his face a mask of death. My breath caught my body frozen, but my hand moved a reflex from our old game. I flicked his ear, the skin hard, unyielding. No laugh, no movement, just silence, thick and final. I backed away, closing the door, the image fading like a dream I couldn't hold. I returned to the kitchen, my movements mechanical. I heated 4 plates of casserole, wrapped Jacob's in foil, and placed it in the oven as if he'd join us. Mom. Dad and I sat at the dining table, the clink of forks the only sound. We ate in silence, the casserole tasteless, the truth unspoken. Jacob was gone, but we played our parts, a family bound by denial, waiting for a knock that would never come. My aunt once told me about a family in her town who lost a son, but kept his room untouched, his plate set at every meal. She said, grief can trap you, make you live with ghosts. We were trapped, our casseroles a ritual, to keep Jacob alive, our silence a cage. But I saw him, and I know he's gone. Yet every night I wait for his ear flick, praying it was all a dream. The city's pulse slowed at night, its streets exhaling a quiet that felt alive, watchful. I pedaled through it, my electric bike humming, delivering food to strangers who never saw my face. But that night, in a narrow alley under the flicker of a dying streetlight, someone saw me, someone who wanted more than just a meal. And they were coming for me. I'd been a food delivery driver for 8 months, a gig I picked up to pay my bills while figuring out life. At 24, I was used to the grind, long hours, sore legs, and the occasional rude customer. But there was something freeing about the night shifts, the city unfolding under my wheels, my headphones feeding me music, or podcasts as I wove through traffic. Thursday evenings from 5:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. were my favorite. The air was crisp, the streets calm, and I could lose myself in the rhythm of the ride. My e-bike was my lifeline, its battery dictating my range, always enough to get me home if I paced myself. That night started like any other. I layered up against the chill jacket, gloves, scarf, and hit the streets, my app pinging with orders. The first few deliveries were smooth, a pizza to a rowdy frat house sushi to an office worker burning the midnight oil. By 8:00 p.m., I was feeling good, my battery still strong, my playlist on point. Then came the McDonald's order, a simple drop-off 12 minutes away. The address was in a quiet residential area, all bike lanes, except for a short stretch of road. I swung by the restaurant, waited 15 minutes for the order, and set off the scent of fries wafting from my backpack. The ride was uneventful, the city's lights blurring past my tires, humming on the pavement. The neighborhood was typical tidy houses, manicured lawns, street lights casting soft pools of light. I slowed as I neared the address, scanning for the house number, my phone's flashlight cutting through the dark. The street was deserted, the kind of quiet that made you feel like the last person awake. I found the house, a 2-story with a lit porch, and locked my bike to a pole. As I knocked, I adjusted my backpack, ready to hand over the food and move on. The door opened, and for a moment, everything was normal. A woman answered her smile, polite, and I passed her the bag, wishing her a good night. She tipped me through the app, and I turned back to my bike, ready for the next order. But as I unlocked it, I fumbled with my power bank, the wire tangled in my jacket. I didn't want to linger in her yard. Those doorbell cameras always made me feel watched, so I pedaled a few yards to a nearby alley, a narrow strip between two houses, barely wide enough for a car. It was dark, the streetlight above flickering, but I figured I'd be quick. I dismounted, propping my bike against the wall, and focused on untangling the wire. The alley smelled of damp concrete and garbage, the air heavy with the city's nighttime breath. I was halfway through switching playlists when I sensed it. A presence, close, too close. My skin prickled, and I glanced up, expecting a passerby. Instead, I saw her. A tall, gaunt woman standing just feet away. Her frame swallowed by a blue hoodie, her long hair limp against her shoulders. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, under the flickering light, her eyes hollow, her breath rasping through an open mouth. She wasn't there a second ago. I froze my hand on my phone, my heart thudding. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She didn't answer, just stared, her gaze unblinking, piercing through me. The silence stretched heavy and wrong until she spoke, her voice low, almost a growl. "You have my food." The words hit like a slap, her tone accusing as if I'd stolen something precious. I forced a smile, my mind racing. "I think another driver's got your order," I said, glancing at my app. "Where'd you order from?" She didn't move, her eyes, narrowing her face, twisting into a hard, ugly glare. "No," she said, louder now. "That was my food." My stomach twisted. The app showed the delivery as pending, not yet marked complete, but I'd handed the food to the right customer. Or had I? I tried to reason with her, my voice calm, despite the panic rising in my chest. "What's your name?" "What did you order?" "I can check." She stepped closer, her boots scuffing the pavement, and pointed a bony finger at me. "My food. I need my food." Her voice was sharp, desperate, and I realized she wasn't rational. Maybe hungry, maybe something worse. What's wrong with her? I thought, my eyes darting to the alley's end, calculating my escape. I remembered a story a fellow driver told at a pickup spot about a guy who'd been cornered by a homeless man demanding his delivery. He wasn't after food, the driver had said, his voice low. He just wanted trouble. I pushed the memory aside, focusing on the woman. "I have snacks," I offered, reaching for my backpack. I always carried granola bars for long waits, and I pulled out a box holding it out. "Here, take these." She snatched it, her fingers brushing mine cold and clammy, and stepped closer, her glare unrelenting. "I want my food," she said, her voice ablaze. My heart pounded, the alley shrinking around me. I backed up my bike between us and tried again. "Check your app, ma'am. It'll show your driver's location." She didn't budge. Her breath heavy, her eyes locked on mine. Then, without warning, she lunged forward, her hand grabbing for my backpack. "She's not stopping!" I stumbled my bike, tipping, and shoved the granola box at her, buying a moment to mount up. I pedaled hard, the motor whirring, but she was fast, too fast, her footsteps pounding behind me, her voice rising in a guttural cry. "Thief! You stole my food." The alley ended at a fence, a low barrier meant to block cars, and I slowed to navigate it, my tires skidding. That was my mistake. She caught up her hand, closing on my bike's rear rack, yanking hard. I gasped, my body lurching, and caught a glint in her other hand. A knife, its blade catching the streetlight's flicker. My blood ran cold, adrenaline surging as I slammed the throttle, the bike jerking forward. Her grip slipped, but not before I felt the tug, the scrape of metal against the wall beside me. She's trying to kill me. I cleared the fence, my legs pumping the motor, straining as I pushed it to its limit. Behind me, her voice echoed raw and unhinged, calling me a thief, cursing me. I glanced back, my heart in my throat, and saw her running the granola box raised like a weapon before she hurled it, missing me by inches. The knife was still in her hand, its blade a promise of what she'd do if she caught me. I focused on the road, weaving through the quiet streets, my breath ragged the city, a blur of lights and shadows. She knows these streets, knows the shortcuts. The thought drove me faster, my bike's battery draining as I pushed it beyond its usual pace. I didn't stop until I reached a kebab shop, 8 minutes away, a familiar spot where the owner, a kind man with a warm smile, always offered drivers a drink. I stumbled inside, my legs shaking, my breath coming in gasps. The owner, seeing my face, handed me water and sat me down. "What happened?" he asked, his voice gentle. I spilled the story, the words tumbling out the alley, the woman, the knife. He listened, his face grave, and called my company, explaining I couldn't continue. A co-worker arrived to take my last delivery, and we rode back to the city center. Together, the busy streets a shield against the dark. That night clings to me a shadow I can't shake. I see her face in every alley, her hollow eyes, her knife's glint. I hear her voice accusing, unyielding a reminder of how close I came to something unthinkable. My company let me end early, but the fear followed me home, seeping into my dreams. Was she starving, desperate, or something darker? I'll never know. And that's the worst part. I still ride at night, but I'm different now. Warier, quicker to check my surroundings. My hand always near the throttle. The city's quiet isn't peaceful anymore. It's a mask hiding threats I can't predict. The city was a maze of shadows, its streets slick with evening mist as I pedaled through the quiet. My e-bike hummed beneath me, the glow of my phone guiding me to the next drop-off. The air was cold, biting at my fingertips, but the rhythm of the ride headphones, pulsing with music, the world blurring past, kept me steady. Until I turned into that narrow alley, its walls closing in like a trap. A chill ran through me, not from the wind, but from a feeling I couldn't shake. Someone was watching, waiting just out of sight. My name is Alex, and I'd been a food delivery driver for 8 months, navigating the city's back roads on my e-bike for a paycheck that barely covered rent. The job was simple: pick up orders, drop them off, repeat. Evening shifts were my favorite calm, with fewer cars and a vibe that felt almost meditative. I'd throw on a playlist or podcast, lose myself in the flow, and let the hours slip by. Most nights were uneventful, save for the occasional group of teens trying to mess with me, shouting for free food, or trailing me on their bikes. Annoying, but harmless. That Thursday evening, though something felt off from the start, it was 5:30 p.m. When I began my shift, the sky already darkening, the city lights flickering to life. The weather was crisp, cold, but bearable with my layered jacket and gloves. My e-bike's battery was fully charged enough for the 4.5-hour shift and the ride home. The app pinged with orders, all close by from local spots I knew well: diners, pizza joints. Nothing out of the ordinary. I moved through the deliveries, with ease, the routine grounding me. The streets were quiet, the usual bustle of the day, giving way to a stillness that made every sound sharper. The squeak of my tires, the distant hum of traffic, the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. By 8:15 p.m., I got an order from McDonald's, a quick grab for a customer 12 minutes away. Not ideal, but doable, with my battery still strong. I waited at the counter, the smell of fries and grease filling the air, my foot tapping to the beat in my headphones. The order took longer than expected, 15 minutes, but I didn't mind. I grabbed the bag, secured it in my backpack, and hopped back on my bike, switching to a new playlist, something upbeat to keep my energy up. The bike lane stretched ahead, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the city, and I settled into the ride, my breath fogging in the cold. The customer's house was in a residential area, a grid of tidy homes with glowing porch lights. I turned off the bike lane, slowing as I scanned for the address. House numbers were hard to spot at night, half hidden by shrubs or faded paint, but I found it a small, single-story place with a neatly trimmed lawn. I locked my bike to a street sign, my breath visible in the chill, and walked to the door, the bagisu warm against my back. I knocked, waited, and heard movement inside, shuffling voices. The door opened, and a woman smiled, her face lit by the warm glow of the hallway. "Thanks," she said, taking the food. I nodded, told her to enjoy, and she slipped me a cash tip before closing the door. Back at my bike, I fumbled with my phone, the screen casting a pale light. My battery was full, but the charging cable was tangled in my jacket pocket, a minor annoyance that felt bigger in the cold. I didn't like lingering in front of customers' houses. Those doorbell cameras always made me feel watched, so I wheeled my bike a few steps into a nearby alley, a narrow gap between two houses, barely wide enough for a car. The walls were brick damp with moss, and the ground was littered with leaves and cigarette butts. I leaned my bike against the wall, my breath steadying, and started untangling the cable, my fingers stiff from the cold. That's when I heard it. Footsteps slow and deliberate, coming from deeper in the alley. My heart skipped, my hands pausing on the cable. The alley was dark, the street lamp's light barely reaching its mouth, and I'd assumed it was empty. Someone's just passing through, I told myself, but the steps were too measured, too close. I turned, pressing myself against the wall, my bike between me and the approaching figure. "Sorry I'm in the way," I said, my voice louder than I meant, gesturing for them to pass. But the footsteps stopped, and no one answered. I looked up, and my blood ran cold. Standing just a few feet away was a woman, tall and gaunt, her face pale under the faint light. Her long hair hung limp over her shoulders, framing a skeletal face that looked drained, almost lifeless. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, locked on mine, her mouth slightly open as she breathed heavily, the sound rasping in the quiet. She wore brown jeans and a blue hoodie, the hood pulled up, casting shadows over her features. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, her skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones, her gaze unnervingly blank. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the fear creeping up my spine. She didn't move, just stared, her breath fogging in the cold. Seconds stretched, the silence suffocating, until she spoke, her voice low and flat. You have my food. The words hit like a jolt, my mind racing. What I'd just delivered, the order, the app still open on my phone, the delivery unconfirmed. I think there's a mix-up, I said, forcing a smile. I just dropped off an order. Where'd you order from? She didn't answer, her eyes narrowing, her face twisting into a hard glare. No, she said louder. Now? Her voice sharp. That was my food. My heart pounded, my hands tightening on my bike. She's confused, I thought, but her intensity, her refusal to explain, set my nerves on edge. I pulled out my phone. The screen's glow harsh in the dark, and checked the app. What's your name? What did you order? I asked, trying to reason with her. Check your app. It'll show where the driver is. She stepped back, her hand shooting out, pointing at me. My food. I need my food. Her voice was a growl now, her body tense like a coiled spring. My stomach twisted, a primal instinct screaming at me to leave. She's not right. I thought, my mind flashing to stories of late-night encounters gone wrong. I always carried snacks, protein bars, easy to stash, good for long waits, so I reached into my backpack, pulling out a box. Here, take this, I said, holding it out, hoping it would calm her. She snatched it, her fingers brushing mine, cold and bony. But instead of backing off, she stepped closer, her glare sharpening. I want my food, she said, her voice low and menacing. My breath caught my back, pressed against the wall, the brick rough through my jacket. Check your app, I repeated, my voice shaking now. Give me your name, and I can help. She took a deep breath, her chest rising, and before I could react, she screamed a piercing, guttural sound that echoed off the walls. I flinched, my body jerking my hand accidentally, twisting the bike's throttle. The e-bike lurched forward, its motor whining, and I scrambled to mount it, my legs unsteady. She lunged her hand, grazing the back of my bike, her scream morphing into a snarl. Something scraped the wall beside me, a flash of metal in her other hand. My heart stopped. A knife. I pedaled the bike's assist, kicking in, but the alley ended at a fence, a chain-link barrier blocking cars. I slowed my tires skidding and felt her behind me, her footsteps pounding her hand, grabbing at my backpack. I yelped, my voice raw, and cranked the assist higher, the bike surging forward. The fence loomed, but I squeezed through a narrow gap, the metal scraping my arm. I glanced back. She was there, her face twisted, the knife glinting as she raised the box of protein bars and hurled it at me. It landed a foot away, the cardboard splitting on the pavement. "Food! Thief!" she shrieked, her voice chasing me as I pedaled onto the street. My breath ragged, my legs burning. I didn't stop my bike flying through the city, the wind stinging my face. I clicked finish order on the app, my hands shaking, and prayed for a new delivery to keep me moving. The next order came a kebab place 8 minutes away, a familiar spot run by a kind owner, Samir. I reached it out of breath, my chest heaving, and collapsed against the counter. Samir's face fell when he saw me. "What happened?" he asked, handing me a glass of water. I told him everything, the words spilling out, and he called my company, insisting I end my shift early. A coworker, Liam, arrived to take the next delivery, and we biked back to the city center, together, the lights and crowds, a shield against the dark, back home. I locked my door, my hands still trembling. The woman's face haunted me, her blank eyes, her scream, the knife. What did she want? Was she hungry, desperate, or something worse? I checked my app again, half expecting a complaint, but there was nothing. The delivery had gone through, the customer satisfied. But I couldn't shake the feeling she'd been watching me, waiting for a moment to strike. What if she finds me again? The thought clung to me, a shadow in every alley, a reminder that the city's quiet streets hid dangers I'd never seen coming. The street roared with rush-hour chaos, but my world narrowed to a single heart-wrenching sight. A small dog flung from a speeding car, tumbling across the asphalt like a discarded toy. My cigarette fell from my lips, forgotten, as I sprinted into traffic, horns blaring, my heart pounding. I scooped him up, his trembling body light in my arms, his eyes wide with fear. He wasn't hurt, miraculously, just shaken. His tail tucked his head low. I carried him back to my workplace, my breath ragged, and decided to take him home. I named him Hank, not knowing that this timid creature, cowering under my touch, would soon become my protector, saving me from a darkness I never saw coming. It was summer 2015, and I lived alone in a cozy house in a small town, the kind where crime was rare, but the occasional shadow lingered. My home was a haven for my cats, their soft purrs, a constant comfort. But a dog was new territory. I knew nothing about canine behavior, only that they needed walks, a lot of them. Hank was shy, jumping at every sound, his gaze wary, as if expecting a blow. I wondered what horrors he'd endured before that cruel toss from the car. That first night, we went outside 15 times, my paranoia about indoor accidents outweighing my exhaustion. By midnight, I was on the porch, lighting my final cigarette, scrolling Reddit on my phone. Hank curled under my chair, his leash slack. The street was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of cut grass and warm pavement. Street lights cast pools of yellow, their glow a fragile shield against the night. I was lost in a thread about urban legends when movement caught my eye. A man walking along the sidewalk, his pace slow, deliberate. He glanced up at me, his face obscured by the shadows, then looked away, continuing past my house. My skin prickled a subtle warning, but I brushed it off. People walked at night, even in small towns. I exhaled smoke, my eyes drifting back to my phone, the world soft and safe for a moment. Then he stopped. I froze my cigarette, glowing faintly, as he turned on his heel and walked back toward my porch. My heart quickened the quiet, now a heavy blanket. He approached his steps, measured his hands in his pockets. "Hey," he said, his voice smooth, almost friendly. "Can you tell me where 302 Church Street is?" I nodded, fumbling with my phone. The map app slow to load. "I'll check," I said, my voice steady, despite the unease curling in my gut. He smiled a sheepish grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't have a phone, myself," he said, taking a step closer. "Trying to get to a friend's place." The map loaded, showing the address 2 blocks north on the southwest corner. I pointed my arm stiff. "It's just up there, 2 blocks on the left." He nodded, but didn't move his eyes, locked on me, unblinking. Hank shifted under the chair, a soft rumble in his throat, a sound I'd forgotten he could make. The man took another step, his smile widening, his voice softer. "Mind if I take a look at the map? I'm terrible with directions." My pulse spiked, my instincts screaming. I stood pointing again, my tone firm. "It's straight ahead, 2 blocks. You can't miss it." I kept my phone close, my body angled toward the door. He didn't stop. Another step, his hands rising, palms open, but the gesture felt wrong, predatory. "Can I just call them? Let them know I'm coming." His voice hardened a crack in the facade. I shook my head, stepping back. "No, sorry." He pushed forward, his smile gone, his eyes narrowing. "Come on, just let me see your phone." My back hit the door, my hand fumbling for the knob. I was out of options, my voice sharp with fear. "Get off my yard. My dog's protective, he'll tear you apart." It was a bluff. I knew nothing about Hank's temperament, only that he was small, timid, a 40-pound beagle mix who flinched at loud noises. But Hank heard my fear, and something in him snapped. He erupted from under the chair, a blur of fur and fury, his growls deep and primal, his teeth bared. He lunged the leash, yanking me forward, nearly pulling me off the porch. He sounded massive, an 80-pound beast, not the cowering pup I'd rescued. His eyes locked on the man, his body pressed against my legs, nudging me toward the door. I gripped the knob, my heart racing, terrified Hank might turn on me, my ignorance of dogs a liability. But he didn't. He stood his ground, his snarls a wall between me and the stranger. The man froze, his hands raised, his face pale. 2 blocks north? Yeah, he stammered, backing away, his eyes darting between me and Hank. I didn't answer, my breath shallow, as Hank's growls grew louder, his body taut with rage. The man retreated his steps, quickening, until he reached the sidewalk. I slipped inside, locking the door, cutting off the lights. Peeking through the blinds, I watched him glance back, his silhouette sharp against the streetlight. He walked away, but not north-south, the opposite direction I'd pointed. Then the final twist. He pulled a phone from his pocket, pressed it to his ear, and spoke, his lie exposed. My stomach churned. He'd never needed directions. He'd wanted me. I sank to the floor. Hank at my side, his body warm, his breathing steady. I stroked his fur, my hands trembling, his loyalty a lifeline. That night, he earned his place in my home, my heart. He's been my shadow ever since, his protectiveness, a quiet strength. He's scared off another stranger, since his growls a warning I now trust. I named him Hank, and I know without him, that night on the porch could have ended in darkness. I can't bear to imagine. My neighbor once told me about a stray cat who'd saved her from a break-in. Its hiss enough to send the intruder running. She said, animals see what we miss, sense the shadows we ignore. Hank saw the man's intent, felt the threat in his smile. He's my guardian now, and every night, as I lock the door, I thank him for the light he brought into my life, a light that keeps the shadows at bay.